benutzten kanalbasierten Systeme sind wir hier unabhängig von festen Lautsprecherpositionen. Wenn man sich jetzt mal ein Stereo-Setup anschaut, hat man zwei Lautsprecher, die Schallwellen interferieren und dadurch wird quasi eine Phantomschallquelle zwischen diesen beiden Lautsprechern gebildet, die ich aber nur so wahrnehme, wenn ich wirklich vor den Lautsprechern mittig positioniert bin. Also es gibt eine Vorgabe, wo der Zuhörer sitzen muss. Bei einem 5.1-System ist es ebenfalls kanalbasiert. Das heißt, ich habe 5 Lautsprecher um mich herum, bin quasi in der Mitte des Geschehens, aber auch nur, wenn ich wirklich diese feste Abwehrposition habe, diese im Studio in der Mischung vorgesehen worden ist. Bei Spatial Soundwave haben wir ein objektbasiertes Soundsystem. Das bedeutet, wir können die Lautsprecher in Anzahl, aber auch in der Position frei wählen und quasi möglichst frei im Raum positionieren und haben deswegen auch keinen festen Abwehrpunkt, weil quasi Lautsprechersignale live gerendert werden. Wenn wir uns jetzt das Konzeptfahrzeug anschauen, sind hier 62 Lautsprecher verbaut. Das kommt daher, dass Spatial Soundwave auf dem Prinzip der Wellenquellensynthese basiert. Das heißt, mehrere Schallquellen erzeugen eine gewisse Anzahl an Elementarwellen, die sich gleichphasig und mit identischer Frequenz überlagern.
Ich habe ein Standard-Mixing-Tool, meinetwegen Pro Tools oder ähnliches. Da habe ich meine einzelnen Audio-Buffs und dann habe ich diese grafische Oberfläche webbasiert, die einzelnen Objekte mir in einem Wiedergaberaum anzeigt und ich jetzt also sagen kann, okay, der Sänger, den positioniere ich als Quelle hier. Dann wird eine Kopplung passieren zwischen dieser Positionierung hier in dem eigentlichen Lautsprecher-Setup, in der Stereo- oder größeren Basis, eine Kopplung zwischen Position, zeitlich vielleicht änderlich, und den eigentlichen Buff-Files aus dem Schnittprogramm.
Wir haben eine Technologie, die läuft stabil und wir können jetzt kreativen Menschen die zur Verfügung stellen, zu sagen, hey, probiert das mal, macht mal einfach was damit.
Yeah, that was just a short explanation, but maybe also it was showing the way we try to get in contact with spatial audio and bring it to students or people that like to make a connection from the media area to the study and research area. So yeah, that's the surface that we're dealing with. So the students get in touch with it the first time like this. They sit in front of the computer and they have this huge space where they can deal with. So then my idea was, okay, I regularly get in contact with those students and I have to teach them in a really short time what they can do with it and what kind of lies ahead of them. So I thought, let's do concept, and in this time I can just give around my handout. It's in German, unfortunately I didn't really translate it, but that's the actual version. And yeah, that's the handout I'm creating, but it's still in progress. So every time I get a new project, I'm going on with the handout. So the concept is what I did for the concept was first the deep literature research, because I'm coming from the technical background, so I did a lot of reading and got a lot of interested in soundscape soundscape studies. Then I did a scoping review, so I tried to get an overview what's happening at the moment and put everything together. So I did a concept map that looked like this at the first slide. So it's a bit of my own thing happening in my mind, but I'm coming to this later. And so, yeah, I found those 3 topics important for what I was doing. So soundscape studies at all, because there's a lot of stuff to transfer from the studies to the artificial design progress. Then the psychoacoustic, because of the perception, of course, it's important. And then the papers and reviews, the stuff that's going on right now, the new experiments and everything that's just up to date. So on the top, I started using keywords to limit my kind of research. And yeah, as you can see here, for example, that's what I was looking for on the internet and in books. And I also put in the atmosphere aspect because I'm looking for the narrative elements. And yeah, then I was looking for the purpose. So in the middle it's my definition, and in the bottom it comes to the purpose that I found out. What's important if you create a soundscape for media. And so I created 3 categories, which are orientation, subtlety, and immersion. So orientation is telling where is the scene playing. Let's say we have an audio play or a 360-degree video. It just has the basic function to show you where it's happening. Then subtlety is something that's special in a narrative context because it's just one element of many elements, which means it can't be too much in the front. It has a subconscious meaning and it's happening in the back. And then immersion is another aspect which comes in because of the spatial audio, which means we are trying to not have a listener, we want to have a practitioner, someone who's inside the story, not following the story. Yeah, so, but that's just my assumptions. So then, for orientation, I directly thought about Schafer with his elements of sounds, the main elements, and in this context I thought about, okay, maybe that's a good thing to give the students at hand at first, that they can have a categorization, so if they plan to create a soundscape, that they say, okay, what kind of keynotes do I have, what the signals are in my soundscape, and what sound marks are in my soundscape. And then the 3D audio maps are also a good tool, because from the first project on we started to work with them. So that was the first assumption. Second assumption, subtlety, is like the, out of my psychoacoustic and research and the practical experience I made with the projects, is like I said before, the soundscape in this context has like a subconscious effect. It stays in the background, and my assumption was to maybe give the students at hand to avoid rapid and loud sounds. Another thing to prove. And then the last category, immersion, was from the actual releases and papers that I often read that like now it's the time for us to have a further thinking, to have an enhanced thinking, not just doing another audio play, another one, but to play with the spatial audio. We have some new things going on. And then the question I asked myself was, is there a more detailed perception for the listener? Do we have to think of it when we produce? And then the physical parameters, which can be set a bit new. So I wanted to give the students at hand, maybe think about how you use your reverbs, how you use your effects. It's to think from the beginning on that it's going to be in spatial audio. Then, and then what I also found out, because if you give the students this chance to be on the special sound wave system, often it's like they put so much in and they're like, wow, let's explore, which I don't want to stop, but in the context of a narrative content where there's a story happening and at the end there's video and other stuff happening, to focus on the important. And yeah, and then to remember to have that every listener is listening different. So just because you get something out of it doesn't mean everyone does. So to think about this. Another assumption I made. So then came the part of the proof where I did a credited expert interview, which was focused, unstructured, and open. So I went to different locations, I contacted different institutes, displays, where I talked with Natascha Dieburg, then 7 Spaces, from Cologne with Patrick Leuchter, who produces 3D music plays, then with also soundscapes in the background. The high-tech studios, they have a special sound wave system, so they make commercial products and also work with Front for IDOT. new audio technology. Tom Ammerman, I talked with him because he's doing the software and he was the award-winning nominee for the Kraftwerk album. So he has also experience in 3D sound. Ron for IDMT, of course, I talked with them. The Hochschule Darmstadt, so from the Fachhochschule Dortmund, I talked with Jörg Lensing, and from the Hochschule Darmstadt, I talked with Natascha Rehberg, and then with the BDR, I talked with the technical leader of the audio play unit, just to ask him the same questions if he would also, I talked with all of them, and told them my assumptions and heard what they think about it. So at the end, because of time, I concentrated on those 4 interviews, and the result was a lot of thinking afterwards, a lot of interpretation, analyzation, and I came to the point that I have to put emotion and narration inside my categories, if there are categories at all. I even came to the conclusion that maybe it's not even necessary to think too much in categories, but it was something at the beginning of the process I was thinking, yeah, that's something I would like to give the students a hand. I moved away from this and got further and further in the idea of making discussions and giving more freedom. Or I never stopped the freedom, but I found out that even for myself it kind of limited my way of thinking. Then the first assumption about orientation was kind of accepted. Like everyone said, it could be a good idea, just not in a limiting way, but just to give the students this at hand. For the point of subtlety, I had to remove my assumptions were not really clear because it's like the intention is playing a big role. And you can't really say something that general. For example, what I was saying, to avoid loud sounds is something, it totally depends on the product and the content. So I turned it into narrative thinking and more to ask questions. So what do I want to tell? That's the first thing I would like to ask the students. What kind of feeling do I want to create? How can I support the story? And do I distract the story? So same with the immersion. My assumptions were more transferred into questions, and and I call it spatial thinking, to have the awareness that we are having a bigger room now. We have an enhanced possibility, and so my questions are: what types of sounds do I have? Are they moving, static, directional, non-directional? So maybe, especially if you don't have much time in the SSPW system, in the spatial sound wave system, that you upfront think about, okay, what kind of sounds do I have, that when I'm there, I just need to place them. That was a good tactic for us, because, time is money in this point, because the system is expensive, the time there is expensive. And then to think about the challenge management upfront, and how do the sound relate to each other? That's also an important thing. And to this remember thing I kept in. And then in the interview there were some inductive statements of the experts, which can lead to hundreds of further discussions. It's like the aspect of relation, to think about now that we have 3D possibilities, to bring this in mind and just list them up now. The hyperrealism, which means you go further than reality, you go more detailed than reality to support something or to intense some certain thing you want to tell. The perspective, which means because now we have the Z-axis, you can do big things, you can make a tree out of different sections, bottom, middle, top, which is new. The emotion aspect, as I said before, it has to come inside. If you want to make a story, it's always about emotions. And the specific aesthetics, which are really important now. Like pretty much every expert was mentioning those, that it's a thing now that the student, or like everyone who's working with the system, should have in mind that there's some specific things that can happen now that maybe couldn't happen before, and that's a really interesting thing, and I think that's the motivation of many students as well. They find out, wow, there's something new, or like something enhancing, so let's try. So the reflection for myself was, it should more lead into discussions, as I said before. So the handout is also more getting a questionnaire time by time. Then everything is depending on the purpose. So every project you have to look again, what do I want, ask the same questions. Then yeah, less with more discussion, as I said, and that I'm still learning. And then narration and emotion for the big topics, I said this again also. And so what's the intention? New tools enable the chance to create new specific aesthetics, and there should be no rules in the creative process are kind of my leading sentences. And then I tried to bring all of this into one sentence, and this is in German because I found it hard to translate. About the translation is kind of technology is a tool for a purpose you want to fulfill, and art is to know how to handle your tools and to question the purpose. That's kind of what I want to give out to people who work with this tool. Yeah, and I'm really interested in further discussions. Also for the next days, I would love to talk with many people, their experience on the spatial audio system, their experience with soundscape design. I would love to bring them in, that I can teach them to our students again, because we have the system now, and it's just installed 2 weeks ago, and there will be a lot of stuff happening in the next time, so I'm really looking forward. So a short video, and then I'll be back. Yeah, so coffee and discussion. We have 3 more minutes for questions. Sorry, the sound was flipping.
Thank you very much, Maximilian. Actually, we have 2 minutes for questions. Who would like to begin?
You used the word enhancement, I think, and for me it would be just interesting from your personal perspective, because I think you haven't touched that topic that much, how or why you think that going from 2-channel stereophonic audio to multi-channel or even 3D audio systems can enhance or even elevate like audio plays. Because in the beginning you said you want to work with audio players, you saw the new system and you said, oh, we have to do something. But it would be interesting why you thought that would be something to invest time in.
Yeah, it's I think it's the immersive aspect that's the most interesting, and that's what our project did at the beginning as well. We thought a lot about, the students thought a lot about making a first-person audio play, which means you're not the listener, you're the practitioner. And we tried to think non-linear, which was also really interesting with the spatial audio. And yeah, I think one of the biggest things you can do with it, and like what I experienced when I sat inside, you really forget where you are, and you have this immersive experience, which is kind of media things happening right now because of virtual reality. There's more immersive aspects. So, and of course you have more space, you have more creative freedom, which gives another enhancement. But I think, yeah, it's still a mission for all the creators to bring up some stuff that maybe you can just do with this and not do with the other system. I think that's also a motivation to have in mind there could be something that no one thought of yet, and that's going to do something that's evolutionary or whatever.
Thank you.
Evolutionary.
Really a question, but yeah, this is just thank you for the interesting presentation. You used the word immersion, and I just want to mention that in the aspect of 3D audio, where you literally immersed in sound, which you are also right now, right? And so you kind of maybe could lose also your critical distance. And having such a powerful tool in hand as a media producer that can reduce this critical distance and create a highly illusionary reality simulation or so, just want to mention that this should be taken in account also in a critical way, on a critical basis. I mean, just imagine being able to simulate things which are not there can lead into a lot of directions. And just want to mention that the term immersion, also in that aspect, should be considered also critically. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
I'm sorry, but I have to interrupt, and now we must keep on going.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you. If you have any further questions, discussion, or maybe input that you want to tell me what you experienced, just come to me later on. I'm going to be here till Sunday. And tomorrow there will be the screening of our audio plays with the students, the Klangwelten projects. It's 2 pieces, yeah. So you can listen to them and have a listen.
And tomorrow, for those who are interested in 3D audio, tomorrow is also a 3D audio workshop running. You find it in the program.
Our next presentation is Adding Voice to the World's Polyphony by Hans Groth.
Okay, hello everybody, I'm Hans Roes. I'm a researcher in 2 places in the School of Arts in Belgium. I'm also a composer, and my topic today is about the role of technology and the concept of technology in on-site compositions. And it's not so technical, my talk, it's more about like a philosophical view at different concepts on technology in this kind of on-site composition. And I give a kind of short summary or short version of the paper which is in the booklet, in the proceedings. So if you want to know more, the reference and all the other stuff is published in the paper, in the proceedings. What I want to talk about is mainly to understand the roles and the concept of technology in on-site composition, which I call situated technology. And also I want to have a more detailed look at what I call a distributed instrument, and I'll use 2 of my own compositions to explain what a distributed instrument is. And I'll start maybe, as I'm not sure how well-known on-site composition is, with a very short introduction and overview. On-site composition is something, I think the knowledge about on-site composition is very fragmented. There are a lot of different terms, and people might know some composers, but in fact there's very rich history of more than 50 years already of on-site composition. And just to say something very short about this history, in fact there was a kind of fall during the 90s in the previous century, which was also noticed by Leigh Landy in one of his books at that moment. But then from 1995 on, there was a new rise, I think, of on-site compositions, and people, composers, performers, also improvisers, making performances which are really especially meant to be played, for example, in a park, on a river, on a lake, in a forest, in a street, in a public place. So all these kind of pieces. And there are 3 main composers, I think, in this domain: Pauline Oliveros, Alvin Kern, and Murray Schafer, because they have produced like a whole oeuvre of on-site compositions, and they've done this for several decades. So they kind of overspan, if that's the right word in English, these two historical periods. They have been active in the two periods, and they created a kind of continuity in a certain way. Yeah, maybe in the history it's also very important to remark that, like, the second period, from 1995 on, from like the 21st century, there's like two big differences, also more on the philosophical and social side, which is that there was the rise of the internet, and so there was a lot of attention for all kinds of virtual realities and real-time exchanges through technology of human experiences. That's the first thing. And the second thing, also, I think the concept of nature, because nature is not only a given and something that we can see, or we can be active or move in nature, but nature is also an idea that people have about what nature is. And this idea also changed, I think. If you compare it to the 60s, the 70s, and the previous century, nature is less seen as something separate from humans and from culture. There's more a mix, and the idea, for example, of a wilderness, that nature is a wilderness, is less and less popular or less and less used. And now nature is more seen as something which is almost part of culture, which is even part of humans, if we look at all the microorganisms which are part of our own body. Yeah, it's important also to realize that on-site composition is not about one type of compositions or performances. It's not only performances in nature, but there's a lot of diversity. And by going through, I've been doing research on a lot of music scores and a lot of interviews and a lot of texts and explanations and videos. And I think that there are, just to make the understanding a little bit more easy, not really to categorize it, but I think there are more or less four main interpretations of what a site is and what an interaction with the site is. And the first one is if there are a number of composers for who a site, a place, in the first place is a human place. So it means that they can, and there's a lot of names over there of composers, older and more recent composers. But for them, for example, it's the local people, their local music. It's the fact that these local people participate in the performance. It's the history, it's the culture, which is important and which is all integrated into the performance. And the performance is taking place somewhere on the site, which is surrounded by this local human aspect. And then there's the interpretation of a performance site as a natural site. So it's a site full of trees, animals, plants, natural forces. And so there's a number of composers. If they write on-site compositions, it's mainly with this kind of natural interpretation of the site. Then there's a third group, which I call the relational site, third interpretation, which started with Pauline Oliveros. She's very important in this kind of concept. And in this interpretation, it's very important that you realize the sound that you yourself are making, realize that you are listening, and realize that there are others around you, and that they are also listening, and that they are also producing sound. And then in the next step, you also become conscious that that you are surrounded by architecture, by nature, by other like passers-by, and so these surroundings are like the third element. And the most important thing is that you become aware of all the different relations that exist at a certain site. And so especially the act of listening then becomes very important, because this is a way to become conscious of your own body and your own ego, if that's the right word, as a listener, as a sound producer. And this relational interpretation, I think, of a place has become very important and productive also after 2000. There are a lot of younger composers, I think, in which this influence of the relational interpretation of a place is very influential. And then there's a fourth group which I call, which interpret the place as an extended hall, I call it. And for them, the focus is still a lot on sound and on music, and they mainly look at the place, even if it's outside the concert hall, they look at this place because it offers a lot of special musical and sound opportunities. For example, if it's a very large place, it means that you can have lots of performers. There are performances with hundreds and thousands of people taking part. You can also spread the performance over a large space, so you have all kind of musical spatialization effects. But for example, it could all be also be the special musical opportunities of the materials which are inside, which can have all kinds of different sound. So these are like the 4 different interpretations of what a site is, and so it gives you an idea of the diversity of all the different kind of on-site performances and compositions. As I was saying, I think there's quite a lot of not confusion, but fragmentation in the knowledge about this kind of in situ composition. And there are a lot of different terms. I've listed some terms, but there are even more. But I use the word on-site music or in situ music. So I just mean that this is music that's meant to be performed in the direct presence of a living, of the living world, of a living place. So it means a place where things are happening and things are taking place and people are passing by, or where there's nature, plants and animals doing this. The term site-specific composition, I don't use that term, although it's widely used. I mean, I think Trevor Wishart was one of the first to use this term like around 1970 in his site-specific performances. But I don't use it because it's also used in literature for music which is played live or played back in a concert hall, which is based, for example, the sound material might be based on a specific site. So that's why I use the word on-site composition or on-site performance. Yeah, so if we, now the main part of my presentation is about trying to understand the role of technology in this on-site composition, because at first sight, this technology is not spectacular and not very technically innovative, but I think it's very relevant because it's kind of ecological view on technology. It's very important to realize that this technology is part of a context-sensitive artwork, and context is meant in a very direct sense. It's about what is surrounding the audience and surrounding the performers at that moment. And the idea of the world or life is something which is very important, which reappears a lot in interviews and texts of composers and performers and improvisers. So they see the world as something which is very diverse, unexpected, which is very multisensorial. A lot of things are going on at the same time. And there are quite a lot of composers which really express a kind of joy or even celebration of the world in their work. So what they want to do is celebrate the diversity of the world, of the unexpected part of the world, and by setting up a performance at such a living site. There's two citations here of two composers, but I could give you a lot more of similar quotations. And this also means, because the living world is directly present in and around the concert site, it also means that there is no urgent need to represent this real world, this reality in an artwork, which I think is very important to understand the role of the technology. And then the next thing to realize is that this concept of the world, in which the real world, in which the performance is taking place, it's one which is full of human and natural agency. So the world is conceived as something full of active relationships. People are acting, groups of people are acting, animals are acting, there are natural forces which are acting, they're all acting together against each other, along each other, and that's how the world is formed. And this means, this is the reason why I think the idea of the concepts of performance and of instrument, they always reappear in this in text and scores of composers. Now, performance is a very multidimensional term. It's used a lot, but I use it with three important dimensions. The first one is that there is an acting human body, and in almost all these on-site performances, there's always a body present. sometimes it's the body of the audience, which people can walk around, for example, during a performance, or the performers themselves may be very visible and active. And also there are quite a number of performances in which the idea of the body or ghosts, like the embodied natural forces, are also shown and displayed. And of course there are also animals which also have their own body. And then the next dimension of performance is the idea that a performance needs to be prepared and exercised and practiced. So it's not only about the first exploration, but it's also the idea that this, if you want to set up, organize a meeting, a performance, a meeting between people and their direct environment, that this needs preparation and some kind of exercise. So if we think about, if you see this performance taking place in this diverse, unexpected world with a lot of unexpected elements, and the idea of preparing this performance and exercising in advance, then that might also be the reason why a lot of the technology used in this performance is what I call like open technology, as used in the term open score that you use to contemporary composition. So it means that it's often very flexible, and it's not just one very specific technology which is asked for, but often it's, for example, as in the score of Alvin Lucier, the piece with the solar, with the bats, Vespers, yeah. He asks for one specific device, but a bit later on in the score he gives a whole list of alternatives. You could also play the piece with, he says, 10 kilohertz short noise bursts, or you can do any very short sound trigger which helps you to locate yourself in a space, more or less should also work to perform this piece. But so it means that in a lot of these scores and a lot of these on-site compositions, you need like flexible technology and also simple technology, or technology which already has a repertoire of actions. So this may be audio technology like classic synthesizers, portable synthesizers, like noise generators or an oscillator, but sometimes it may also be, or for example, a megaphone. There is a picture of the megaphone ensemble. It means that some people are used to using this tool already, so you can start from that repertoire already to advance and to create a performance. And also this repertoire, in a way, it helps not only to perform a score, like a plan of the meeting, a plan of this meeting between people and the environment, but it's also very important, this repertoire, to enable the performers to deal with the unexpected elements of a performance. So think about a cycler on a bicycle. He or she also has, of course, a repertoire of actions and to be able to cycle. And the idea is not only that you can reach a certain place thanks to this whole repertoire and this experience of actions, but this also helps, of course, to deal with the unexpected elements which take place all the time in the living world. And the same happens, of course, in a performance. If you perform outside, or in a place where a lot of children are running around, or in a marketplace, a lot of unexpected things happen, but thanks to this kind of repertoire of actions, you are able to use this technology and deal with these unexpected elements. I'll just so to summarize more or less this role of technology in on-site composition, I think it's important to understand this situated technology as a part of an active prepared performance aimed at creating a meeting with the living site and using instruments which fit the human body. And then the next step, which is important to understand, is that often the sound producing instrument, which might be like a classical acoustic instrument or electronic device, this sound producing instrument, together with the supporting technology and together with the site, the place and the performance, often grows into like an overarching distributed instrument. And I'll try to show this with two of my own propositions. it's not always easy to explain these compositions because they are really taking place. They are really taking place in one situation, in one place, and it's not only about the sound, but also about the whole experience. But the first piece is it's called Not Necessarily Music. I'll first try to describe it. It's you see, two performers are playing a digital music instrument, so it doesn't produce any acoustic sound. In a public place. The first time it was performed, it was in like in a public library. Where people are reading and looking at computer screens and listening to music. But it could also be like in a train station or in a park. And if the audience wants to listen, they could take one of the wireless headphones. So there were a set of headphones available. People could, if they want to listen, they can take a headphone. They can also just look visually at the performance. And also the two performers, they also have their own headphones, so they're not always hearing the same thing as the audience. And in a way, this performance is inspired by the different configurations which start to exist between public and private spaces. Nowadays, more thanks to the portable technology, people often work with their laptop at public space. Of course, people listen, for example, through a headphone to music, which is kind of private experience, but then in the public space. But even nowadays, more and more you see people playing an instrument, music, in a public space, but they're doing it acoustically silent. I mean, they're playing with a headphone on, and they're, for example, playing a keyboard or playing a piano. There's a piano in this public library, and people are always practicing piano, but they're doing it with a headphone. And also, of course, people are using sometimes even now like small networks, or for example, think about a guide, a tourist guide, and a group of tourists. Sometimes they're using this wireless audio system, and you have like a small group walking in a public place, which is not a private experience anymore, but they're like a group space within an overall public space. And so what is happening in this performance is that, I'll show it. At certain, you have the two performers, so they're playing a digital instrument, and at certain, this is like a scheme of the composition. It's free to choose a duration. It's kind of improvisation. There's a microphone also picking up environmental sounds. So where the people are sitting in the library, and just outside the library, there were very big windows. Sometimes the two performers are just only playing for their own. It's like a private performance. So they are the only ones who can hear what they are doing. At other moments, they have different inputs of sounds that they hear. For example, they might only hear the microphone from outside, and then they play together with the environment. Or sometimes the V is from visual. Sometimes they can just look at the second player, and this player is just playing privately something for his own, and they try to play together with that second performer, but only based on the visual information, based on what they see. And then, for example, at a certain moment, we have a audio, they both hear each other, and then they play together. I'll play a short audio fragment, and in fact, it's just a section from A and B. So at the beginning, you hear audio, and you hear the microphone picking up environmental sounds from outside the library, what you see through the windows. And then at a certain moment, the second performer starts playing. So you don't hear the private performance. This performer was just playing for his own. And this second performer is playing an instrument, like a sampler which was created, and which also has some characteristics of this keyboard controller which he was playing. So you hear the sampler is playing like sounds of different keyboard keys and different keyboard pedals, and also of the reverb when you lift the pedal on a piano. It's fragmented about 2 minutes. Not sure how to things like this. So at this moment, you also see somebody playing privately or so, but you only hear the sounds from that which are coming from out. this is the second performer playing on the wind controller. So the outside the library, this is like a maquette, or how do you call it in English, of the library. So there's a river and the streets with cars. That's the sounds that you hear. So in fact, in this case, the distributed instrument. So you have the musicians are playing an instrument which sometimes works together with the other performers, which sometimes is purely private, and sometimes it's like playing together with the whole surroundings. And even the audience can take part in the performance, because if they start making sounds, these are picked up by the microphone, and if the musicians are reacting to what they hear at that moment to the microphones, the audience can even influence the performance. And the practice or the preparation, what is difficult is that the performers, they have to learn how to switch between these different spaces. So these like private space playing for themselves, the group space, and then also really the wide surrounding space. Yeah, and so again, in a way, this is still flexible and replaceable technology, because the most important thing is that technically that there's a kind of multicast system with a latency which is low enough to make sure that there's a relation between what you see and what you hear, and whether this is an FM system or with a network system doesn't really matter. And the same about the digital instrument, digital controllers. This was a performance with a piano controller and a wind controller, which you could also use an accordion controller, you could use a percussion controller. That can be replaced, but the most important thing is the links between the environment and between the different performers. And then one other example of one other example is very short. It's the idea of this performance is that you have performers using a trolley, a roll suitcase as an instrument, and by in advance choosing different streets, which always have different stones. I've noticed that's the same here in Dieburg. And then one performer has a wireless sender, and a click track is made in advance with like simple rhythmical patterns, sections, and then, for example, after 50 seconds, the tempo changes, and there's a slower or faster tempo. And so they all listen to the same click track, and then they try to synchronize, they try to play along with the click track by walking faster or slower with the trolley. And then the difficulty, of course, so it's often very difficult to synchronize, because the difficulty is that it's not easy for the human body to try to synchronize together with the trolley. You have to walk in a certain tempo, but at the same time you have the different street stones with a different size and pattern. And then of course you have the trolley. So it's for me it's about how synchronization can reveal the different characteristics of a site, about how people at certain places, at certain moments, can act together, but at other moments it falls apart, and at other moments it's more or less together. And so synchronization can help to reveal the characteristics of the site. And then I won't give the audio, yeah. And the conclusion, so I'll just read it for me. So a performance site and its living presences have shared that place before the artistic intervention took place, and they will continue to do so afterwards. So on-site composition accepts this given liveness of a site, this continuity, and so it mainly wants to add something to which is already going on. And so it does not create an autonomous artificial sound world, but tries to stage an encounter between the participating people, the performance, the audience, and the given surroundings. The combination of music instruments, technologies, and affordances of a site into an overarching performative tool, which can be mastered by human performers, ensures that again, new features of the site and new ways of experiencing it are discovered. So technology is not an autonomous force in on-site composition, advancing towards a faster, more lively and realistic sound production. No, technology is confined by place and time, and it operates within a distributed instrument to meet the real physical world. Okay, that's
Thank you very much, Hans. And the last presentation is Songwalker, creation of augmented songwalks by Annie McCann.
Okay, thank you everybody, and thank you Max and Hans for your really interesting talks as well. I am conscious that the next thing on the programme says champagne, so I'll try and do today I'm talking about augmented sound walks, developed by myself as a member of Sound Kitchen, which is a Birmingham-based organisation, and also the work that I do at the University of Birmingham. So I'm going to give you an overview of where I'm coming from before talking about Soundwalker, which is a mobile application that I launched earlier this year. So Sound Kitchen, as I said, is an organisation based in Birmingham, and we're dedicated to the promotion of sound-related events and activities. It's run by myself and a couple of other practitioners in the field, and we put on lots of events, or we used to anyway, we practice ourselves as composers and field recordists. And in around 2013, we began developing our practice of sound walking. So, not that we probably need reminding, I need reminding, of what a sound walk is, but a sound walk is any excursion whose main purpose is listening to our environment, and that's, of course, Hildegard Westerkamp's definition of one. We create what we call augmented sound walks, and know that they are not unique to us, that other practitioners do create augmented sound walks. Christina Kubish and her electrical works, for example, Janet Cardiff. But we did devise our walks very much from our own perspective of what we wanted to produce in a walk, and how we wanted to develop our sound walks. So, as I said, we've been devising sound walks since 2013. Our primary concerns are that we're interested in encouraging people to engage with the sound environment. And all of our walks were guided by us, by the Sound Kitchen Collective. And they typically involve simple ear cleaning exercises designed to draw attention to different sonic features, particularly to the location. We're also interested in extending the walker's listening abilities by augmenting the natural hearing range through the use of audio technology. So these augmented listening points may include, for example, listening to recorded audio tracks that present recordings from locations at different times of day, night or year. We might transport listeners to visible landmarks such as inside of a church or onto the roof of a distant building. We will also use carefully placed microphones to allow walkers to hear hidden sounds from locations that would usually be inaccessible, such as underwater, high up in the branches of trees, or inside objects. Walks commonly range between 40 and 90 minutes, and the maximum group size for our walks is usually set to 12 people. Before they come on a walk, walkers are sent a download link to recorded audio tracks, so they can download them in advance, and they're requested to bring them along with a device and headphones, and at certain points in the walk they'll be asked to listen to them. We would also take a number of MP3 players ourselves and headphones, so we're not excluding anybody who doesn't want to download their own stuff or don't have their own technology. As members, we all own a variety of different microphones, which include hydrophones, contact microphones, electromagnetic coil pickups and condensers, and we deploy those on location. The live signal from microphones is accessed via a portable recording device and a number of battery-powered headphone splitter amplifiers, enabling walkers to plug in their headphones and listen simultaneously. The creation of each sound walk, so I just realised I haven't been flicking through my slides. So this is what the sound walks entail. The creation of each sound walk usually involves an extensive period of research and development in and around the area where the walk is located. So this typically spans several weeks and includes exploring and listening to the environment, planning and conducting field recording trips, and delving into the historical, geographical and cultural aspects of the area. Considering the route is really important as well. Structure and development are considered as they would be in any other exposition. And as Hildegard Westkamp says, the soundwalk leader, as she mentioned today, knows the basic piece of the sonic route, but in the end it invariably gets altered and recomposed. So the leader always listens with a composing ear, and that's really true of our walks. They'll be mapped according to conditions of the time, but with a consideration or expectation that these may be quite different on the day when we take people on walks. Some may be predictable and some may be not. And often we'll have alternative routes up our sleeves if we need them. So an example of one of our augmented walks is one we did in 2013. This was the first one we did at Edgbaston Reservoir, which is a reservoir just outside of Birmingham in the UK. It was our first full-blown walk. It was commissioned by a walking festival which previously hasn't done any sound, it's just been guided walks. And it was a 2-hour walk around a 2-kilometre reservoir. Along the way there are 8 stops which explore the environment. So participants, as I mentioned, were asked to download tracks. And the main focus of this walk was perspective. So the listening stations all address perspective in some way or other. And first up, participants were asked to gather around a tree stump and listen to a track, but they weren't told what it was. And what it was the sound of stridulating ants recorded with contact microphones. So obviously they wouldn't be audible to the naked ear, but they also wouldn't be audible on the day because they were there and then they were gone. So had we put microphones in on that day, we'd have heard nothing probably. We did have a live hydrophone recording. Due to our technological limitations at the time, which was the number of headphone splitters we had, we could only plug about 6 people in at a time. So we split the group into 2. One would listen to the live microphones, the hydrophones in the shallow waters of the reservoir, whilst the other group at the same time would be listening to hydrophone recordings made on a boat further out in the reservoir, and then they'd swap over. It was quite handy because activity in the lake that day was fairly low, so there was a real contrast in those recordings. Participants were then asked to play a track while they were walked in a field just alongside the reservoir. Then they were told to walk to a certain point, turn around and walk back. As they walked back, they were asked to play the track, and they were walking the same route as the sound recordist was walking, only the sound recordist was walking it 6 months earlier in the snow. And that was a binaural recording that the recordist had made. Then there was a live microphone position, which was a stereo recording in a tree about 20 metres up, which involved some quite hilarious chopping of microphones. They were safe. Offering a very different perspective of the whole landscape, with leaves, birds, all in much closer proximity than we could hear on the ground. For the pre-recorded option, the participants were asked to look across into the city centre where the newly built library was in view, and they could hear a recording made up on top of that library as well. Towards the end of the walk, they could hear even song recorded inside a neighbouring church, and at the very end, they could hear, as it was dusk, they could hear back recordings that we'd made at around the same time the week before. So here's some pictures of this walk. So that's walking along the reservoir, listening to the hydrophones intently, and as it's getting to dusk, we're sort of coming towards the end. They play some contact mics on the fence in a short while. So the next one, I'm just going to give you one more of our guided walks. It's Ponte Delgada, a more recent walk which was developed in Ponte Delgada for the Invisible Places Conference in 2017, and some of you may well have been at. So in developing this walk, my colleague Ian and I, we spent a few days on the island prior to the conference, exploring and making field recordings around the island of San Miguel. It was a really short research period, but despite that, we had the help of and knowledge of local residents, guidebooks, maps, and we were able to visit a variety of locations and learn about the geography, geology and wildlife and culture of the island. These field trips took us to Puerto Formoso Beach on the north coast, Calora Harbour on the south coast, the Calderas, Lagoa de Fogo and Lagoa de Sao Bra, amongst others. Time was also spent within the town of Ponta Delgado itself, listening and recording, and the marina and the area around the University of the Azores, which is where the conference was being held. In response to our research, the conference location and the time constraints in the programme, we devised the route, which you can see here, which just brings you down from the conference. Number 1 is the conference location, and number 13 here is where we ended up. It was about 45 minutes long, and in that space of time, the listeners were able to experience a varied soundscape of narrow cobbled streets, live markets, the subterranean car parks and the marina. And the next image up here just shows you what we explored and which bits were live listening posts. So we had hydrophones and we had contact mics set up. We had some MP3 recordings and we had environmental sounds plus listening exercises in there too. And here are some pictures of the walk, and some more. And interestingly, the first day that we did this walk, there was a massive cruise ship in the way of that beautiful view, so it didn't quite go to plan, but we're used to that. So the Sound Kitchen Sound Walk was already augmenting reality, in my opinion. But we did want to develop our walks further, obviously create more walks, but felt that we put an awful lot of research into and development into creating these walks, and then we guide them. We managed to run this walk twice whilst we were at the conference, but obviously without being back in the Azores, which I'd go to again very happily, we can't really guide them again. So we talked for quite a long time about developing some form of mobile app in order to, or other means for people to experience these. And that's where Soundwalker comes in, which is the app that we released last year. So this app is quite simply a GPS-triggered local audio mobile application, and it's developed by Echoes.xyz. So the Echoes platform already existed, and it's developed by Josh Kopacek, who's based in the UK. And I contacted him because I'd been trying to develop an app for quite a long time and didn't feel the need to recreate something that already existed and already worked, but rather to work with him to develop a bespoke app that will work for us in particular. So anybody using the app can go to a specific location where we have a walk and can walk into an echo, so to speak. I'll show you a picture of one in a moment. And GPS will trigger a sound to play. Sounds can behave in quite different ways depending on how we program them. So it could be that you walk in the zone and they can fade in and become very strong once you're in the very centre of that zone, but then fade out again. We can allow sounds to overlap. We can direct sounds to stop when the participants exit a certain place. So by working with a mobile app, it suddenly offers us a completely new dimension and considerations in developing sound walks ourselves. So I'm going to give you some examples of some of the walks that we've done. Like I say, I launched this app in 2018. One of the main initial things I was planning to do was to take the library of walks that we've created, particularly in the area that we work, and get those on the app straight away. So we had our alternative version. But what happened was it was a lot harder than I thought, which I'll touch on in a moment. But also suddenly a lot of opportunities arose. So one of the first ones I did was a quantum technology sound walk, working with the university's quantum technology hub. This is based on the university campus, and it's the concept is to use sound to highlight the importance of quantum theory for everyday existence. So it's part of an arts and science festival. Looking specifically at the services and devices that we use in everyday life and don't necessarily realise quantum technology is behind them. So there was pre-recorded sound with a narrative as well, explaining theory behind some areas of quantum technology, such as clocks, mobile devices, banking, transport and medical uses, the latter of which included MEG recordings of brain activity that people could listen to as they were walking towards a hospital. This Way to the Revolution, developed the following month, was commissioned by a local film festival and formed part of a 1968 commemoration strand of the festival, which looked specifically at student sit-ins and riots at the university in 1968. So this walk included archive footage from student newspapers, music and archival recordings, and tracked the unfolding of this protest, as well as we took a more modern stance on it as well, bringing in more recent protests. So both of these, I think you'll agree, are quite different to our initial idea of what our sound walks were. On the left there you can see that was This Way to the Revolution, and they're just tracks over the top of that with routes that people would walk, but you can see that each of those circles or shapes is a different sound in it. I've got 5 minutes, so another couple that I did, which are more environmental, the Winterbourne House and Gardens, which is a botanic gardens, and Resounding Yardley. So both of these take environmental sound. Winterbourne was one that I had developed beforehand, so it did exist as a lead walk and still does. And they're pure environmental. There's no restriction on the route, and the user can just go into the area and explore as they wish to. With the top one, it's a work in progress, so it's and it will carry on being a work in progress as long as I go and do recordings there. But similar to the experience that participants could have in the reservoir, you might listen to a sound in a specific location, but it would be recorded at a different time. You'll have the ability to listen to hydrophone recordings, to listen to canopies in the botanic gardens in different weather conditions. And the nice thing is that you can take as long as you want, and you can come back again and again, and we will update it on a regular basis. Resounding Yardley used field recordings from the district, so from a much larger area, but they were mapped onto a smaller area. It just accompanied a composition that I'd done within the community that was performed in a church, and after people came to the performance, they could then take the app and they could walk around the churchyard and go on a virtual tour of the whole district, listening to field recordings made that had also been included in the work and some that hadn't. So I'm just going to show you a few pictures of people on our using our app now. So this was one we did in June for an artists' conference looking at the regeneration of art spaces within this area of Birmingham. So you can just see here. And I'll happily discuss any more of these walks or more things that we do after this talk, if anybody would like to know more. So finally, the user experience. We obviously have many considerations when creating a walk that I've covered in quite some detail already. As I said, our initial aims and objectives are quite important. We want people to engage with their listening environment. So we've spent a lot of time thinking about functionality of an app and what do we actually want to be giving as an experience, and we haven't got the answers yet. We're still developing this. But certain things like, do we listen to the real world on the walk, or is the whole experience through headphones? If it's all through headphones, then is that stopping people from engaging with the environment, or will they take the headphones off and be more engaged? That's a question I don't know the answer to. How do we tell the listeners what to do if we're not guiding them? How do we tell them the route? How do we tell them, for example, if we do want them to take their headphones off, how do we tell them to do that? Would we use text? Would we use a narrative? All questions that we are exploring at the moment. Is all the material pre-recorded, or do we have a recorded narrative? Yes, just said that. So some of these answers we thought we had before we started developing the app. Some of them we are slowly getting, but one thing that that has sort of come up with this is that when you're working with technology, replicating an experience isn't the way to go. Trying to just take something that we've already created and create a new version doesn't really work. And we've got to have a flexibility and exploit the technology for its strengths. We've got quite a list of things that we think we want to do, but at the same time we don't have a budget to allow us to build all that functionality in on the word off. So now what we're doing is working within the limits of the technology and developing new walks and slowly building up our wish list, so to speak. But we have had observed how participants engage, and we think that we are creating quite a unique experience. I think arguably there is a way that much media consumption is going, in that the collective experience, it can be argued that the collective experience isn't so common, what with streaming and on-demand TV, virtual reality experiences. But we still like that collective experience ourselves and the communal experience, and we think that's quite special about Soundwalk. So one way that we counter it is having these semi-guided walks, so that people can experience everything together. They've got our guidance, but at the same time, they're left to their own devices, so they still have that very internal and meditative experience, hopefully. Other things is, observations are that the app is only as good as your own GPS signal, and attempting to create very, very specific and finite detail has been difficult, and so we've had to sort of rethink how we deal with GPS. Feedback has been good. There's been certain inevitable technical issues on some platforms and operating systems, which can be frustrating. But we always carry an MP3 with us, just in case. And many have been really complimentary. The 1968 Soundwalk, we had somebody who was actually part of the protests, so it was really great to hear from them. A few more reflections. By developing this app, it's helped us to expand and develop what we do. We can diversify our content and our approach to soundwalking. We've been able to diversify our audiences quite quickly through the collaborations and the opportunities that have arisen. And that's opportunities again. And I will finish there because we've reached the end. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Annie, for your presentation. Is there any questions? We have time.
Yeah, I have a question. I really like your presentation and your work in Poland and Canada. I have a question about what you say, and maybe you have already been thinking about that in relationship of the connectivity and expanding new narratives. So are you guys thinking to create an open app where perhaps other people in other locations as well, other languages, can also add into these sound blocks, perhaps in places that for you guys that is outside of the UK is not accessible for other people, that it might be or create a huge awareness of very specific local culture, relationships with either nature, like social, political implications, so and so. I know that might be another layer, but yeah.
Sure. Well, I think it's a fair point. I think so. Firstly, obviously, we're in the early days, but one thing, just coming to what you said at the end, is that we've already colour-coded our walks because they're not all environmental. So we do have political, historical, social, environmental, artistic, because we've also got some more artistic interpretations on a sculpture walk, for example. Being able to get to Ponta Delgado and was great, and we wanted to have the app ready for then, but we like to use any walks that we've done outside of the UK and put those in the app ourselves. But what you say about working with other people, that's definitely something that I'd love to do in the future. This whole project came out from a much bigger concept, which would have been open source, crowdsourced project, starting with internet-based stuff, and then the app would have followed. But just because of funding and needing to create something, and this opportunity came up, that's how I've done it first. So yes, that would be fantastic. It might take a while, but certainly branching out. I think we've got big ideas, but we decided we'd focus on the city so we can do it ourselves for now and get things. I think there's still quite a lot of development to happen with the app itself. One thing I didn't mention is one of the future plans and one of the modes for developing at the moment is looking at 3D audio and being able to stream that over 5G networks. So that's a research project that I'm working with Josh, the developer, we're about to launch into now, because ambisonics is another area for my work too. So there's quite a lot of scope for this to go in many directions. And one thing I've learned recently is that I have to hone things in to begin with, and then let them sort of explode. But I think it's great that you said that though, because if there's an appetite for that, then it gives me the impetus to sort of push it out there a bit more. Thank you.
Short question. Okay, thank you very much. I have to close this session, and I'm very happy that all of you were here. We have a champagne reception in room 18-5.